Yo, hello everybody. Welcome to Bitcoin, Not Crypto. This is the weekly live stream. My name is Forrest Hodel, and I am streaming from your mom's basement, or at least that's what it might look like at this point. We have officially moved. I got my own space, no longer have to share my studio / office with a nursery for my daughter. And I haven't been paying a lot of attention to Bitcoin lately. MSTR, there's lots of news, lots of things to get into. We're going to explore some things together, and I will be happy to answer any questions that come up. You can place those in the chat. We have a few people watching already, and I always like to start the show off as a special treat for the early viewers to the live stream. I like to do a couple tosses in the Bitcoin wishing well, which I'll bring up on screen now. So there's going to be a QR code here in the middle of the screen after I throw these coins in the wishing well, and you can win some free sats, some free Bitcoin. So if you're the first person to scan this QR code with your Lightning wallet, you will win. And this is something you can do yourself without the competition by signing up to Bitcoin Well, doing the KYC process, and you will get some free tosses in the Bitcoin wishing well. We're going to do one more, and we'll do two at the end of the show. And we'll get into a few different things. I think one thing that's really interesting is this, as you can see by the title of the show, the US dollar strategic reserve. There's a bit of a mixed bag with that one because it feels weird for strategy to hold dollars and not immediately smash buy Bitcoin. That's part of the value proposition of strategy, is that they are going to raise capital the way they do, and they will buy Bitcoin immediately with that capital. But as you can see, strategy is quick to pivot. I think that's one thing that I think that people will criticize of strategy, but is actually a benefit. That when they are doing something, they are looking for the most efficient way to do it. They find something that works, they lean into it. But if something comes up, if something changes, if the market doesn't appreciate it, if it doesn't continue to align with their thesis, they do pivot. So we'll get into all of that. First, I'll read some things in the chat here. Hello, Letha. Nice to see you on the channel. We'll get to your question here, Bitcoin blockchain, after we show a couple things about strategy. We're kind of going to go through this. What's going on here? I'm going to refresh. There we go. We're going to go through this together a little bit, this presentation, and we'll look at a few metrics. So we'll look and see. Let's see, what do we got here? Company update. So we're going to go through, there's only 22 slides. We'll kind of go through them quickly. Total acquisition cost. Let's see, this is since the beginning. So this represents their entire Bitcoin thing. Fong and Michael did do a presentation on this as well, which I haven't had the time to watch, unfortunately. But you can see quite a lot of Bitcoin acquisition this year. Q1 2025, we started with 528,000 Bitcoin. Now we're at 650,000. So just an even amount there. This is interesting. I thought my Bitcoin yield prediction was 30%, and they originally, I think, started with 20 or 25, and then they revised upward to 30, and then now they are revising downward. So this is because they're reacting to real-time metrics of getting less Bitcoin than they thought they would, right? That's just plain and simple. They do still have a little bit of room to get to their target. The reason for this, of course, is that they can only, basically the ability that they had in 2024 to issue shares to buy Bitcoin in large amounts is relatively tapped. They also aren't doing convertibles because they're not as beneficial to the shareholder. It creates a lot of short selling of their stock. So they are leaning on their preferreds, which are new instruments. So they're just not able to raise the amount of capital that they originally thought they would. In my estimate, that's reasonable. The market might react to this to some degree, although I think right now it's mostly just reacting to its connection to Bitcoin. Revised assumptions and corresponding results. Let's go down here. Has a robust capital structure with low LTV. So Bitcoin reserve here, enterprise value, they have a 1.2 times MNAV to their enterprise value. They have 11% loan to value or LTV of their debt. And then the preferred equity is equity that never comes due. That's something that I think some people are not fully grasping at this point, is that there is no callability of these equity shares. So if all of this convertible debt gets erased, there is no, the share price could fluctuate all over the place, but there's no ability for strategy to be underwater in a debt way where they have to liquidate anything. They're not forced to do anything because it's equity, not debt. 800 million of dividends, which we get to here. This is probably one of the most interesting slides, I imagine. Although, again, we're going through this together at the same time. Strategy announces a $1.44 billion USD reserve. US dollar reserve will be primary means of funding our dividends. So they raised this, I believe, in 8.5 days, was my understanding. And they didn't buy any, or they did buy some Bitcoin actually, but not much. And then they raised 1.44 billion. So there's all these, I mean, when price of a stock goes down or price of an asset goes down, everyone's going to come out of the woodworks with a Substack, with a tweet storm, a tweet thread, whatever, and they're all going to say, "Oh, strategies, Bitcoin's getting close to its." Well, with this case, Bitcoin's going close to their cost basis. They have all of this, end of quarter. There's going to be this large dividend payment because most of their dividends get paid out quarterly. And they're not going to be able to fund it. They're going to have to sell their Bitcoin. Guess what, you idiots? They raised 1.44 billion, which is 21 months. I believe it's 21 months of their payments that they have to pay. So all that FUD, all of the saying they have to sell Bitcoin, no, they don't. You were wrong. You were wrong. So the reserve targets a minimum of 12 months. They intend to strengthen the reserve with the goal of 24 months, which is going to have to increase as well, because you're going to have to think that the preferreds are going to be issued more, which means more dividend payments. So the cash balance is going to go up because they're going to push towards their intended goal, and they're going to be issuing more equity that whole time. They're going to be rolling off their debt, which has really low interest rates as well. So 2.2% of the enterprise value and 2.4% of the Bitcoin value, the 1.4 billion. We raised 1.44 billion in 8.5 trading days at 4.6% trading volume. So they accounted for 4.6% of the essentially selling of new shares, because they sold MSTR to do this, to fund it. And we sold MSTR at an average MNAV of 1.17. And this is that the enterprise value or market cap? Yeah, well, it's built off of it's measured from either their market cap or their enterprise. I think they measured this from their enterprise value to the holdings of their Bitcoin. So this equated to a US dollar gain of 207 million. So it was quite expensive for them to raise this, but they still ended up with, because of this MNAV, they still ended up positive with the cash compared to the selling of the shares based on the value of the underlying Bitcoin by 207 million. Seems convoluted. It is a little bit, but they raised a ton of cash. Now, this is an interesting question, right? They're going to be holding on to this cash. They're going to be paying the dividends every once in a while, but this cash is going to stay relatively stagnant or potentially grow over time, um, as I stated earlier. And that cash is a melting ice cube. And they're actually, if they, what are they going to do? Put it into treasury bills? Like that is probably what they'll have to do, because what else can you do with your cash as a corporation? And that's only going to have some interest on it, which is going to be low, and especially low compared to the dividends that they have to pay. So this cash, although it provides a safety net, is going to be a net negative on appreciation of their assets over time compared to buying Bitcoin, of course. But it's sort of this idea that there's this sort of this mentality or concept where the safest asset to hold in the long term is Bitcoin. The safest asset to hold in the short term is cash. And that's because cash does not suffer from volatility risk like Bitcoin does, but it suffers from debasement risk, which is inevitable essentially at this point. So they're they're well capitalized on this sort of long-term basis, and this cash gives them a good standing in the short-term basis. And we recently got a B minus for strategy, for their credit rating of their corporation. None of their preferreds or debt are what's the word? I'm drawing a blank right now. Rated. That's the word. Rated. So, and part of S&P's rating, of giving them basically a junk debt credit rating, was because they didn't value any of the Bitcoin. None of the Bitcoin was valued, and they still got a B minus, right? So, if the Bitcoin was valued at its ability to be sold into the market, which it entirely is, able to, then reasonably that market would go, or that rating would go up. So there's kind of a lot of knock-on potential effects of having this cash balance. There's going to be a lot of less FUD. There's going to be a lot more, um, probably a lot more feeling of reliability with the dividend payments, considering they have the ability to pay the dividends with the cash balance. There's no speculation of selling the Bitcoin or how they're going to fund it or anything. We have already funded it, right? So that's kind of the concept here. It's also going to strengthen, it says it right here. Our US dollar reserve strengthens our creditworthiness. So that's part of it too, is this will strengthen the credit ratings, ability to increase the credit rating, which has a bunch of knock-on effects as well. Strategy to fund US dollar reserve. This is slightly interesting. Above 1 times MNAV, they'll just issue common stock. They'll below 1 MNAV, they could sell their Bitcoin or sell Bitcoin derivatives. Now you really have to zoom in here to see what the caveat there. Strategy does not currently engage in any Bitcoin-related derivative transactions, but may do so in the future. Any such activities, if undertaken, may involve significant additional financial, market, operational, and legal risks, including the risk of loss of all or part of the Bitcoin underlying a derivative transaction. So they could sell cash-secured puts, possibly, like Metaplanet does. They could create some sort of Bitcoin backed derivative product priced in dollars. There's a couple different things they could do there. We'll see if it gets to that. They could sell their Bitcoin and buy back their stock below 1 MNAV. Part of that might have a market reaction, but it hasn't been done before, so we'll kind of see how that ends up going. And then there's this crazy spaceship here. We built the world's first digital credit vehicle. Okay, if you say so. Looks cool. Looks good to me, Yeah, so that's about it right now. We'll get into some comments, and we'll go from there. Let's see. If old holders of Bitcoin, real whales, sell their Bitcoin to Wall Street, don't you think it will be existential threat to our economic security? If we lose this opportunity, we can never be free. Individually, it's a loss for your own security if you plug your Bitcoin into the financial industrial complex. The real whales you're talking about, if you actually look at wallet movement, it's largely people from within this 4-year cycle. So it's not really whales. It's sorry, it's not OGs, or it's not the old holders of Bitcoin. It's people playing the cycle game of Bitcoin's price action. Real whales, people that have huge amounts of Bitcoin, they're going to be selling. And right now, the buyers are institutions, Wall Street, and there's a lot of on-chain addresses that we don't know who they are that are buying as well. Could be banks, could be sovereigns, could be private citizens, all sorts of stuff. So there's these regular distribution events where people will hold for a certain period of time and then they'll start to distribute the Bitcoin. Every time you sell Bitcoin, you risk the inability to get that same amount of Bitcoin back. That should be acceptable to you if you're selling for improvement of your life, and to, the only thing more scarce than Bitcoin is our time. And there's no point in passing down 1,000 Bitcoin when you could pass down 100 Bitcoin and you could live any life imaginable, having sold those for experiences and any life events. Rough night. It's always a rough night. I got a 6-month-old, but I know my lighting is not optimal right now, and I naturally have terrible bags under my eyes. Genetics and lack of sleep and bad lighting. So if I go like this, see, I don't look tired anymore. Guys, I'm not tired if I just look up like this. Just bad lighting. I rushed to set this up to get this live stream out. 21 months. Nice. BTC gain will be a bit lower as they siphon off dollars towards the reserves during the bear. Not a big deal for the added risk off it provides, which should in turn draw more investors to Strife and Strike. Yeah, this is a really good analysis and really good input here. Yes, it could be a little bit lower, which is why they've potentially why they've revised their targets. Now, if this provides and instills more safety into their preferred instruments, then this will draw more investors, which draws more capital, and a percentage of that capital, or the capital raise that strategy gets, is now going to go towards this cash reserve, but the other portion of it is still going to go towards buying Bitcoin. So it's actually like a really smart sort of dual strategy. And then the caveat there is that they're holding US dollars, which suck. So yeah, it's quite frustrating they didn't think of this when MNAV was +3. Yeah, my bags are heavy. Yeah, I think a lot of us have heavy bags right now. I mean, I've basically round tripped my entire MSTR position that I bought last October, except that I sold covered calls against the whole thing and extracted a bunch of value out of it. But, still would have been better off just having sold. But, it's hard to time these things. And to me, MSTR is operating in such a way where they've instilled the faith in me that they will prevail and be successful. But yeah, I understand that. I think they did. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's quite frustrating they didn't think of this when MNAV was 3+. I think it's better that, it's not optimal to sell MSTR shares close to MNAV, right? There's only the dollar gain of 200 million on a 144 billion raised, relative to the Bitcoin holdings they have. So it's a small spread between MNAV, or for their MNAV right now. But when their MNAV was 3+, they were selling a ton of shares and buying Bitcoin. And yes, Bitcoin did not have an amazing year, but there's again, good luck predicting that kind of stuff. So I think the opportunity cost or the risk cost would have been worse. Of course, hindsight's always 2020, right? So it would have been great to just have cash because cash would have held its value somewhat. Yeah, when were they even 3+? It would have been, I guess, November or something like that. Bitcoin's up since then relative to dollars to some degree. So to me, it's like they bought a lot of Bitcoin and I'd rather them have a huge amount of Bitcoin. And of course, that Bitcoin is going to collateralize the preferreds, not directly, but it sort of indirectly collateralizes them. And then the dollar dividend amount of the US dollar strategic reserve they have now is not collateralizing them, not over collateralizing the value of them, because that wouldn't make sense. But it pays the dividends amount. I suppose they didn't expect TradFi to attack in such coordinated / daggers out way in such a short time period. Sailor just needs to continue steering the ship in the storm to do what's necessary. Yeah, this is kind of another reason. This is, again, Jupiter, you got the good insights here. This is great. So I agree with this. So there is a bit of maybe future speculative concepts or conspiracy around how coordinated it might be, how intentional it might be, how much TradFi and bankers and all this kind of stuff actually care about strategy in Bitcoin. I think there's a little bit of that, and we'll see how much more into the future. It's really speculative to some degree. But that being said, there has definitely been TradFi in just the sense of market participants, right? The Jim Chanos short, basically the compression of MNAV, the idea that the short term price, like it's sort of like the market is testing MSTR, like the thesis and the business strategy of being able to sell at a premium. It's like the market is saying, well, what if you can't do that? Like, are you still viable? And everybody sort of needs to know that they are still viable for them to continue on that way. So the market is sort of testing that. I do really believe that the market continually tests. It's sort of like, people will say like technical analysis is astronomy for men. But what happens is when there's a gap in the market, when there's not enough information about who's buying and who's selling at a certain price, that sort of seems to act like a magnet for the price to go back there, so the market can figure out who is a buyer and who is a seller at this price, and create more data and more information about who's willing to step in or who's willing to sell. So I think it's kind of like this with strategy as well. And strategy, although they have this major long-term vision with their Bitcoin holdings, is also needing to, part of that is dependent or leans on their ability to have positive MNAV and good short-term price action relative to Bitcoin to some degree in the short term. So they, as much as they focus on this long-term vision, their bonds are 4 years out. Their Bitcoin holdings are going to grow compounded beyond the cost of capital with the preferreds and all this and that. They don't have really any focus on the short term, and the market is sort of punishing them for that. And if you listen to the short-term MSTR analysts out there, like Josh Mandel, for instance, like you don't want to take that dude's advice if you're a long-term thinker, because he's a short-term thinker, and you don't want to take Jeff Walton's advice if you're a short-term thinker, right? So it's kind of like these two types of holders need to have some assurance of what MSTR is doing and some attention placed on the outcomes of the short term and the long term. And holding US dollars, as I said, that's a short term play. covering the dividends with the US dollars raised and keeping that in US dollars instead of Bitcoin is short-term thinking. And maybe that just balances strategy out a little bit more so that people, there's still going to be the Ponzi allegations and all sorts of stuff and all that, but it's going to be maybe potentially a little bit more balanced with short-term and long-term vision. Why attack the biggest commercial Bitcoin supporter when the TradFi will be affected by the overall drop due to FUD? Yeah, so a lot of times, you know, the idea here, as far as a coordinated attack to on a commodity or on an asset is, you come out with your research papers and say copper's going up. Meanwhile, that whole time you've been buying and holding copper, and now you're ready to sell it. And so you're selling it into a market that is thinking that it's going to go up because you need willing buyers. The inverse happens as well. You FUD an asset with your research and with your news to lower the price so that you can continue to accumulate it at a good price. And then you allow the natural inevitability of the market pricing an asset at fair value to drive it back up, or you know, reverse your media and advertising funding to pump the price up, and then you can sell into that, or you know, have the appreciation of that asset on your balance sheet. So that would be the reason to have a coordinated attack on something like Bitcoin, is to lower the price to scoop it up. So you want to be on the side of the large institutional holders that are doing that, right? Like, you want to be a buyer when everybody's afraid. That's just how it works. Nav, do you know how to sign a transaction on Envoy Passport using a micro SD? It won't let me do it through photo scanning. I've never used the Envoy. I haven't used any of the Passport stuff. Passport, Envoy. So off the top of my head, let's see. No. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't know how to. There should be some tutorials out there. Or you would do it through Sparrow. And basically, my understanding, it should be the same as, say, the cold card, which is what I prefer to use. So you would build the transaction on Sparrow. You would have to plug the SD card in to export a wallet, right? Your XPub onto a watch only onto Sparrow. On Sparrow, you would select the UTXOs you want to use, paste in your receiving address, create the transaction, load it onto the SD card, take the SD card out, plug it into your Passport. Then you should be able to, through the settings on your Passport, access it, sign the transaction, take it out, put it back into your computer, load the transaction back into Sparrow, and use Sparrow to broadcast it to the Bitcoin network. That is just roughly the information to do so. How that all functions through their UI on Passport side, I'm not sure, but that would be my guess at how to do that. There are trillions at stake for the market that STRC/STRF are targeting. Big banks don't want to lose that liquidity and continue offering sub 3 to 4% interest. Yeah, that's true as well, right? Like, they want to have the ability to borrow at these lower rates, to offer lower rates so that the cost of capital is cheaper for them. They're now competing with Strategy, and Strategy is paying out higher, and they have the ability to pay out higher because they're backed by Bitcoin and Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate. And they're going to have to compete. They're going to have to compete at some level, to some degree, as STRC and STRF become more popular and more recognized for their stability. Nakamura, thanks for your thoughts. I believe it might make sense to have a secondary dip buying fund that gets topped up at high MNAV values. There's nasty corrections after euphoria sooner or later. Absolutely. And this is true with almost all assets. Like, things cannot go vertical forever, because eventually the buyers run out, and then euphoria drops and people begin to sell either to take profits or to move on to the next shiny object, and so on. So euphoria almost always will have a correction, if not sideways action at least. VHF, what's up? Nice to see you in the chat. It's unfortunate that despite 16 years of existence, not many people understand Bitcoin. If people knew what Bitcoin is all about, it would cost $1 million today. Yeah. I think once enough people, there's sort of this concept and theory about like the boiling point, right? And this is kind of the idea of like a revolution doesn't take 100% of the populace to agree with it or to come on board. It actually takes a relatively small amount. And this is sort of the boiling point, right? It takes a percentage, a relatively small percentage of people to actually have a real effect on history and on change of the world. So if everybody understood Bitcoin wouldn't be $1 million because it wouldn't have a fiat price, because people would say, well, why am I accepting dollars? Why am I using dollars that can be printed at zero cost of production when Bitcoin doesn't have a middleman and has a real cost of production, which provides a value to it that is more concrete and more. So what's interesting about all money is it always ends up having to be a belief system, but the factors and the variables and what makes up Bitcoin, there's more to it than something like fiat. And so these concepts of the decentralized network, the permissionless money, the cost of production, all of these things will instill more belief into that asset having value than just simply my government requires it for taxes. My government has oil under the ground, or goes to war. It can put you in jail I don't know. Just a lot of it just doesn't make that much sense. So money is always going to end up being a belief structure because it has more value than its intrinsic value, right? So even gold, right? Gold, about 45% of it is used for industrial and jewelry, cosmetics, things like that. So that means that 55% of gold's value, now these are really rough metrics or whatever, but is belief, right? Belief that it is worth something. It is belief, it has a monetary premium on it. People believe that it's worth more than its utility value. So what's interesting about Bitcoin is it's stripped out utility value. Now, you could argue that the utility value is being able to have a bearer asset that you're able to send to somebody around the world at a really low cost. You're able to put it in a Lightning node channel, be able to have thousands and thousands of payments within there, route them all around the Lightning network. You have to value that. I mean, that is maybe a sense of utility in some way, but it isn't any utility if it has no purchasing power to it, right? So there's sort of these two things that you have, that the one only works because the other one is built on belief. So it's stripped out the utility value, or like what some people might call intrinsic value or real world value or something. So the only thing it has is monetary value, right? It's all monetary premium with Bitcoin. And monetary premium is built off of the belief that something has money, that something is money. So it's a pure money, much more pure than gold is or anything else is, because anything else will be combined with some real world use case. So yeah, I mean, to me, it makes sense to have pure money. Nav, I took 180 covered calls this week. experienced when MSTR got to 160 today. I've also been selling puts as well. Both sides pay. Nice. Yeah. So I do this in a registered account, so I cannot sell puts in that account, but I can sell calls on mine. I'm going to wait for a little bump up on the price before I sell calls today. You just get more premium, and 1 day of theta is probably worth it. 1 or 2 days of theta if MSTR has a little run or Bitcoin has a little recovery. It just had like a sort of a liquidation event yesterday, basically, is what my understanding of it is. And again, I'm pretty out of the loop here with Bitcoin right now with everything that's been going on personally in my life. I keep hearing this idea of MSTR issuing a stablecoin backed by their Bitcoin holdings. Reminds me of Luna, but MSTR actually has the Bitcoin this time. Do you think that may be the next move by Saylor? So I actually made a couple of videos about STRC when they first launched, and my initial concept with that was not MSTR issuing a stablecoin, but a tokenization company tokenizing the shares of STRC, which are going to get, as STRC gets more and more developed, as there's more arb traders arbitraging the immediate drop after the payment, the dividend payment, where it drops to like 95, and then there's $5 of value that it gets to before they start hitting the ATM. That's a lot of arbitrage opportunity there for traders. And the more people that do that, the more money that goes into that, the quicker that recovers, and the closer the ARB gets ARB'd out, right? Eventually that's going to happen, and STRC is going to just stick super close to that $100. So my concept there is strategy isn't going to do something, but another regulated or unregulated, that's possible too, but it might be difficult because they're holding a financial asset that's highly regulated and pays dividends and all that. So I think it hasn't happened because of the difficulty of tokenizing these kind of assets. But the idea here is a tokenization company goes through all the regulatory hurdles to do so, could tokenize STRC, could fractionalize it 100 times. So $100 financial product becomes a $1 asset that can move around on crypto rails, whatever that looks like, and can either take all the payment themselves or pass that payment on to the holders, so that it's not because people can earn interest on their USDT, right, or USDC, but they're putting it into DeFi protocols and lending against it, borrowing against it, all this kind of stuff. So there wouldn't be any necessity for that, and they could, this tokenization platform could, take 1% off the top and spit back 9.75% paid out by strategy to the token holder. And that would, if people started doing that and using that as if it's a stable coin, that would create a huge amount of demand for that stable coin, which would create a demand for STRC. So that's possible. It's possible, and it would be backed by all their Bitcoin holdings and and now the US dollar dividend rate and all of that. So we'll see how that plays out. I think there's probably some reason that hasn't happened, but I know that Stoker, which operates on the Liquid network, has tokenized the debt of maybe the convertible bonds of strategy. They've tokenized MSTR shares, something around MetaPlanet, something around a couple other of these treasury companies. So those are financial products. I don't know how the passing on of the interest, how all of that works, but they've already done it to some degree with something else. So I think it is possible. I don't know that much about it, and I don't know what it will end up looking like, but I do think that's a possibility. Yeah, they upped their rate, and that should increase demand as well. The cash reserve may be a response to SATA, which is funded upfront for a year or two for cash reserves. Okay, I didn't actually know that. I know about SATA, which is basically a similar product to STRC issued by Asset. I didn't realize they had a cash reserve. And I think what's interesting here is that a lot of these treasury companies are like copycats. Like, they do not innovate. Metaplanet has innovated a little bit, and now we might see that asset has innovated a little bit, and they're all sort of learning from each other, which is good. So I like to see that. I like to see that other treasury companies are not just full on copycatting and are actually innovating in some way, and they can see, okay, has this strategy we did that is different than what strategy is doing? Is it working? Is it not? And they can all learn from each other and become more efficient. Bitcoin's real world use case is that it is perfect money, which we have never had before. Exactly. Nothing has intrinsic value. The value is given from the trust and belief to the product. This is when the Bitcoin bulb will light up for most people. Yeah, exactly. It's all subjective. There's no intrinsic value. It's all value is subjective. An example that I always use is, people will say, well, bananas have intrinsic value because they're edible. I can eat them. They don't have intrinsic value to somebody that's deadly allergic to them, right? They actually have a negative value. So that's subjective. Yeah. Anyway, it will take some time for our fellow humans to figure it out. Exactly. We are ahead of the curve. There's nothing like it, and perhaps this is why Bitcoin is so hard to understand by many. Exactly. It is really difficult to understand. I think people that understand it now, they're probably more inclined to understand some of the key principles from the get-go than a lot of people are. A lot of people have no understanding of anything similar. And because Bitcoin is so unique that you have to try to equate it to something else to begin to understand it. And then you begin to understand that there's a lot of novel concepts that are built around Bitcoin. So you might get into Bitcoin, you might think, oh, it's digital gold. Okay. I understand gold. I understand gold is mined. Bitcoin is mined, right? You start making these really simple connections that are all incorrect. Like Bitcoin is not mined like gold is mined, right? It's a computational hashing that mines Bitcoin or creates new Bitcoin, right? So it's like you have to compare it to something to begin to understand it, and then you realize, okay, well, those comparisons are flawed because Bitcoin is its own unique thing, and now I need to understand all these little nuanced things to be able to understand it in its entirety. And you begin to understand that you probably never understand it in its entirety because are you going to go through and audit all the lines of code and understand exactly what executes here? And, there's just so much to understand here. So, yeah. It sounds like we need to get Clarity Act finalized to move these ideas solidly forward. Yeah, so Clarity Act is the market structure bill in the US. I imagine, well, STRC is US based. So, and all this tokenization talk that I had about STRC, that's all going to have to happen, in the books, the good books of the old US system there. So, yeah, I think the Clarity Act could be big for something like that. And if I had any foot in the door to be able to do it, man, I think that would be killer. I think a crypto rail STRC product stablecoin would dominate. Like it would begin to look very attractive as people understood it more and more. Yes, there's nothing like Bitcoin, no CEO, no single human on board behind it, just computer code that is supported by nodes and miners, permissionless, immutable, absolutely scarce. So every single one of those things you just said, needs to be explored by an individual just beginning to understand it. And there's nothing like it. So each one of those things need to be understood and combined to create this conception of what Bitcoin is for every single individual. First thing in human history with absolute scarcity and fixed supply. Even that alone, right, is completely novel. There's nothing else in the entire human history or the universe that, if we believe the theory that the universe is expanding, right, then there's nothing else with a fixed supply or nothing with a tangible fixed supply. Yeah. What's up? Glad to see you in your mom's basement. I'm watching 40 minutes behind. Great to see you in the chat. Let's see. Safe way to earn yield on Bitcoin. Yield is intrinsically opening yourself up to risk. If you're engaging in, like, the only way to earn yield is to, wow, geez. on Bitcoin itself is not even to use Bitcoin itself, because it doesn't have a DeFi capability. So you have to create a wrapped Bitcoin smart contract on some other shit coin, and then lend it out. It just becomes this big thing, right? So yeah, I wouldn't. That's how I would. I wouldn't. I would hold Bitcoin. I would understand that its growth rate is the yield, and it's compounding into the value of Bitcoin, and can be unlocked as purchasing power at any point into the future as that yield is built into the US dollar denomination of Bitcoin. That's what I would do personally. Upbit, South Korea's largest crypto exchange, suspended all deposits and withdrawals, including Bitcoin. This is interesting. I didn't hear about this. This could be part of the reason why there's been some liquidation. Maybe. Did you buy more MSTR or Bitcoin today? No, I have not. Yeah, we'll see what I do today. I might take a look at the market, see what they're doing at some point, and see if it makes sense to sell covered calls today, and then that would give me some cash to do something like that. But my treasury for pleb tools is built, so I did not buy any Bitcoin today like I have been for the past few months. Let's see, present, share screen, pleb tools. So I was buying Bitcoin every week. But now we are at 1 million Satoshis bought, and 1.5 million Satoshis in the treasury. So we'll just see. This portfolio value will eventually continue to grow on its own without the stair stepping is just going to continue on being flat. We don't plan to buy anymore. In fact, it might actually go down. But I'm going to also add in the donation amount here too. Yeah, so we'll see. Maybe I'll do I don't know how I'll do that. I'll figure that out. Safest way to earn yield on Bitcoin is to buy it and hold it for 4 years. Did this guy just wake up or has been pulling his hair out? Nope. Just chilling. Yeah, my hair's a little messy. Who gives a flying? Did you sell crypto? What? I don't know what the hell that means. No would be the answer to that. And I'm probably just gonna, yeah, there we go. I have a limit order set for around 79K USD. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we go down there. If we do, I'll have to scrounge up some capital here. Moving is not cheap. Yeah, furnishing a new place, all this stuff. A little bit more capital starved than I'd like to be for being able to buy right now. So we'll see. Oh, this is interesting. Here we go. We got news incoming. Upbit, South Korea had large unauthorized withdrawal activity. Ooh, sounds like a hack to me. Sounds like a hack. Yeah, I mean, just more and more reason to learn the skill of self-custody. Even if you're going to self-custody, you can self-custody these shit coins like Solana. Learn the skill of self-custody. It's not an art, it's a skill. You could learn, find an open source wallet that you trust, that looks good to you, the usability. Use open source software in combination as your companion app. Make sure you're using secure connection, air-gapped preferably, seed phrase, passphrase at a minimum, keeping those two things separate. And once your balance builds up on an exchange, or if you're buying through, say, Bitcoin Well, you're buying in large enough UTXO sizes, or you're buying to a Lightning channel and swapping over with their zero fee function swap into your cold storage, keeping that secure and keeping the seed phrase, passphrase separately, having multiple backups, and not exposing yourself to the risks of having your Bitcoin on an exchange. Once you have that on there, you have a claim to Bitcoin, and if that company goes bankrupt, they will create some strategy of giving you back either the dollar amount or some type of equivalent of that amount of Bitcoin, but oftentimes you'll get screwed. That's been the case in the past. And you will not see the value, the true value of those holdings that you held on an exchange, because you never learned the skill of self-custody. Now, don't rush into self-custody. Learn the skill before you take self-custody. Absolutely. So we got a question here from Nav. How do I turn on Bluetooth on Jade without unlocking it? Won't let me enter the PIN to unlock unless it's already connected to Bluetooth or USB. I used iPhone green app on with Bluetooth for interface. So how do you turn Bluetooth on without unlocking it? You need to unlock it to turn the Bluetooth on. So you can either, with the Jade, you can either have it connected via Bluetooth or USB, and you actually have to change the firmware to do one or the other. So like they're not both compatible at the same time. So if you want to switch from one to the other, you'll have to connect it and do that update and transfer that information to the Jade to update it to that other firmware. Yeah, you'll need to turn the Jade on and unlock it to. Won't let me enter the PIN to unlock unless it's already connected to Bluetooth or USB. That's interesting. I used iPhone. So there's sort of a catch-22, it sounds like, almost going on. Like you're not able to turn the Bluetooth on, but you're not able to unlock it unless it's connected to the Bluetooth. Interesting. Yeah, that's weird. You might have to connect it to USB to get fired back up. That's very strange. Hey, my Solana shitcoin is earning 7% more shitcoin until next alt season, so I can rotate out of Solana and into BTC. Got to have some degen fund nowadays. Yeah, I would. I would avoid that. If you look at the inflation rate of Solana and the market cap of Solana has grown, but the US dollar amount has stayed the same because they're just issuing so much of that. You're earning 7%, but that's off of new Solana, basically, and so you're earning part of the inflation that's going on with that asset. And yeah, I mean, you do even worse off if you didn't hold that, right? So I think in the long run, it makes no sense to trade shitcoins to get more Bitcoin. It just doesn't work for the vast majority of people, and it's a waste of time and energy. But each to their own. You're smart, Jupiter. Besides this comment, I've basically agreed with everything that you said. So each to their own. I'm not. You do you is what I'll say. Why am I not 100% in Bitcoin, but carry some? Carry some cash and STRC balance as well? Because I have bills to pay in fiat. I guess strategy is in the same situation now. Kind of, yeah. That's a good way to put it. Actually, they have short-term bills to pay, monthly and quarterly, and now they have the cash balance to do so. And it's not so uncertain, which uncertainty is bad for the markets, right? For the asset. So that's part of it, is to level out some of that uncertainty so MSTR can start performing how it used to. Is it possible to store your seed phrase in a easier way rather than relying on the multiple words? You could do one of these seedless wallets, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend them. Something like a BitKey. Not my vibe. I think the seed phrase is pretty easy to do. You just have 12 words. You write those down. You stamp them into some titanium. You have multiple copies of that in different locations. Pretty easy. If that's too difficult, then yeah, you're going to be missing out on Bitcoin self-custody. I mean, this is the easiest way safely, in my opinion, to do it so far. Hey, this is interesting. Solana's inflation is only 2%. It's definitely not a waste. I was able to buy 100 times more Bitcoin because of rotation trades. Wow. Yeah, good work. Cool. And it's purely speculative in Sol at 29. Cheers. Wow. Nice. Yeah, I mean, Solana had a massive run up there from its low. I actually was still trading a bit of shit coins back then too, and bought at 18. I bought a bunch of Solana at 18 and just continued to sell it as it was going up and rotating to Bitcoin. So I did the same thing. I am guilty of that. But now I hold no shit coins, just Bitcoin. Focus on my craft. Focus on focus on providing some value is what I decided to do. But again, each to their own. Okay, so we're going to do a couple things here, guys, to just end the show. I wanted to shout out my QR code right here. If anybody wants to donate to the show, if anybody's gotten any value, you can actually send some sats via Lightning over this QR code. And I will also read out any comments that I do get from that. And also, we're going to do a couple more tosses in the Bitcoin wishing well to give you guys some free sats. And if you need a Bitcoin wallet, if you need coaching services, titanium seed plates, for these 12 words, if you need a Bitcoin node, privacy phone, there's 5 to 15% off of every single thing that I just talked about in the description of this video. And all of that goes to support this show as well. So I do appreciate that. Anybody using any of those codes. All right, let's present this screen. We're going to do 2 tosses, and then I'll leave you guys there. Redeem 500 points. And again, signing up for Bitcoin Well does give you some of these free points, and you can do this yourself to win some sats, because only one of you will win these 431 sats. First person to scan wins that. We're going to do one more. Hopefully somebody got that. I'll zoom in maybe a little bit. And we'll do one more. I had somebody win 210,000 sats one time. So this is no joke. Like, yeah, these are only 400 and somewhat sats, these two. But there's the possibility of it being a lot more. You can win up to 1 million sats. So 210,000 one time. It's crazy. I almost didn't throw that in. And then somebody said, hey, let's do one more. I was like, okay. And then boom, 210,000. And no, Bitcoin Well is not available worldwide. It's available in Canada and the US. Yeah. All right. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Again, links in the description. All go to support the show. Book a session with me one-on-one if you have additional questions. Appreciate you all tuning in. We do this live on Nostr as well. That's another thing I want to shout out. We do this through Zapstream. We're on Nostr. Oh, actually, we got a few zaps. Chef White zapped 69 sats and said, great job. Appreciate that. And Let's Faux Live zapped 21 sats. Appreciate you both. And that's over on Nostr. So you can watch this on Nostr, and you can zap right through there as well. Really easy to do to support the show. And it's, a decentralized way of me being able to share my content, have my content available, and support the Nostr network. Appreciate it all. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.